history of where we are, it started out with, we had constables. And when Charlie Farrell and Neil Humphrey, in that sequence
I've still got Charlie Farrell's number.
Yep. Those were constables, and they worked at the time, in the context of the day and so forth. Then when Neil took over, there was a time when the state's attorney, and I don't even know who it was at the time, I don't remember, but this is probably going back over 20 years, the state's attorney decided that he would not, or she would not, pursue, they wouldn't even pursue any tickets written by a constable. So we took a town vote, and there was enabling legislation from the state legislature. We took a town vote and eliminated the elected position of constable. We maintained an appointed position and defunded it, basically. So that's when, shortly after we took that town vote, is when we first hired the sheriffs. Early on, the first 2 years, at town meeting after we did that, there was a couple of individuals on the floor that tried to eliminate it from because at about that same time, we reduced the speed limit around town from 35 to 25. And so just the sequence of events, the two that I remember, the two vocal opponents of the sheriffs were the first two that got tickets. And they tried to eliminate the sheriff's department in a floor vote on the town floor at town meeting, and they were resoundingly outvoted. It wasn't even close. It was a voice vote, but it was clear that the town wanted the sheriffs. So over time, we've had various and sundry things. Where we are with the contract at this point is probably 3 or 4 years ago, you may remember this, Cynthia, we had our contract with the sheriffs normally comes due in the middle of summer. So we're halfway through our calendar year when we get the renewal of the contract. I think it's because they work on a fiscal year and we work on a calendar year, but that would be my only explanation for why it falls in the middle of the year. But at any rate, there was several mandates that came down from the feds and the state that required the sheriffs to increase their price significantly. So at that point in time, we decided, we were at that point, we were 25 hours with the sheriffs. We decided to, in order to maintain the budget that we had, the town had approved, that we would cut 5 hours out of that time to save money and still be able to have the service to some extent. That's the way it's been right up until this year, for the last, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years. And the sheriffs this year, the contract, unlike that year when we decided we needed to cut it 20%, this year the price is the same as last year. So it's not a function of the budget. We had, Matt brought up issues with accountability, and we do have, you've seen those.
I've read through those.
Yep.
I can comment on those.
And I'm going to let you comment, anybody that wants to comment on those. But those we've gotten the accountability or some information from the sheriffs that we requested, and it was in a timely fashion. I think we should continue moving forward with that information as part of their invoice. Every time they send us an invoice, we get a reading on what they've done for the time they've spent and so forth. So I'm going to throw it out for anybody that wants to comment on it, and take your time and do whatever.
I'll comment. I mean, I think we did
Can I suggest, though, one at a time?
Yep, definitely. I'm going to go around the table one at a time, but let's start with Matt.
So I think we did a good job trying to renegotiate the proposed contract to terms that better benefit the town of Arlington. I think it's important to remember that in this instance, we are the customer, and so we can really dictate what and how things should be done. Mm-hmm. With that said, the Sheriff's Department was here. They did provide us some information for some past billings going back to the April timeframe. understanding that part of that was during different periods of the pandemic when maybe they weren't doing as many stops as they were.
Right.
I have to say that based on the amount of time that they spent, and even in the most recent weeks, the number of contacts they've had, the number of warnings or even tickets that were issued, based on the amount of time that they've spent, is quite frankly embarrassing. That we have wasted this money, and if this has been going on, to be perfectly honest, in my opinion, we have been wasting taxpayer dollars on the Sheriff's Department. When you look in our town report that they provided, it appears that there was about 107 total incidents, arrests, and complaints that they handled that were listed in the town report for the period of January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. Now, I asked Nick, and he reached out to the state police and got us a report, which he did email out to everyone, just to see how many incidents did the Vermont State Police handle in Arlington for the same period of time. Now, mind you, our tax dollars pay for that, but not through our town tax dollars. And their total calls in Arlington were 589 calls. So over 5 times the amount of calls they responded to in Arlington over the Sheriff's Department at no additional cost to us. Of that, 324 traffic warnings were issued and 125 traffic tickets were issued. And that is extremely higher than the Sheriff's Department, whom we paid, what, $35,000 to $44,000 of what we have budgeted for the Sheriff's Department. And even if you look at the most current one, if I go back in some of their patrol logs, and now I don't have all the details and I didn't request the Freedom of Information Act on it, but there was a DUI that they stopped somebody for at 10 a.m. But if you look carefully on that patrol log, they had 3 contacts that day and they issued 1 warning. They didn't issue any tickets. Now, I don't know exactly why that is, but I have some presumptions, and it could have been based on either who actually processed the DUI or the officer's training and the potential that maybe he was or wasn't permitted based on their level of training to do that. I don't think that the Sheriff's Department contract, even in its current renegotiated state, is worth the money that we're spending on it. That's my opinion, based on all of the data that I have looked at and the amount of work and tickets and calls that the Vermont State Police have responded to in Arlington based on our state tax dollars that we all pay versus spending $44,000 of our town tax dollars on additional service that really is fruitless.
Tim?